Guess what? I sold my house, my brother-in-law Kevin said. My husband and I were really surprised, and we didn't know what to say. But the most surprised person was my mother-in-law. She looked really upset and asked, "Why? Weren't you supposed to come get me?" Kevin tried to calm her down and started to explain. "I'm Sandra. I work from home with my husband Robert. We love our peaceful workplace where we can take breaks whenever we need," I explained. Then my mother-in-law moved in with us. We were doing fine financially, so we didn't mind. "Why don't you both go out to work?" My mother-in-law would look at us with disapproval as she asked this. It made me feel tired, like we were going through the same thing all over again. The first time she questioned us like this, we explained that we were working from home. "But are you actually working? I've told Robert the same thing. Are you paying attention? When will you two get serious about work? Aren't you thinking about your future?" My mother-in-law couldn't understand our job. "Oh, I'm so worried. I wonder if I made a mistake coming to this house. Maybe I should have gone to Kevin's house," she would often sigh and say this. The Kevin she mentioned is Robert's brother. He married a wealthy woman named Carol. And it seems like he's living off her money now. My mother-in-law didn't know about this. Kevin asked us not to tell her. My goodness, Kevin's house isn't small like ours. It's huge, like a castle from another country. Well, I'm thinking of moving to Kevin's house eventually, which will be my new home. My mother-in-law would often say, hoping Kevin would come to take her there. But we knew deep down that Kevin and his wife would never come to get her. You see, Robert once suggested to his brother that their mother could live with him. But Kevin didn't want to live with her. So we ended up living together even though we were criticized for working remotely and called unemployed. We just accepted that's how she is. But then something happened that made it impossible for us to keep putting up with it. Out of nowhere, we got a call from Kevin. "He's coming over this weekend," he said abruptly, then hung up before we could say anything. What do we do now? That guy hasn't changed at all. Robert and I were puzzled. And hearing our talk, my mother-in-law leaned in, looking excited. "He's coming to take me. Please help me get ready to move," she said, pulling Robert towards her room. "Mom, Kevin isn't coming to take you. He probably called for some other reason," Robert said, worried. "But he didn't mention anything about picking you up when he called, did he?" I added. "I'm so tired of this house. You probably want to turn me into a housekeeper, but that's not happening," my mother-in-law replied with a scoff. We couldn't understand why she was thinking like that. Since she came to stay with us, she pretty much did whatever she pleased, didn't help with any chores, and relied on the money we gave her. Well, we weren't going to force her to stay, so we packed her bags as she asked and waited for Kevin to arrive. During the weekend, my brother-in-law and his wife showed up at our place. As soon as they walked in, they had these suspiciously friendly expressions on their faces. I had a bad feeling about it. Just then, my mother-in-law came out, looking excited. "You're finally here. Let me tell you, Sandra is not good at doing housework at all. So I have to do them, and Robert completely ignores me. Isn't that terrible?" she said, acting like she was the victim. Then brushed past Robert and welcomed her brother into our home. "You guys don't mistreat Mom. There's no way we're doing that. We're giving her an allowance, and she's eating whatever she likes. Plus, Sandra is handling the house chores," Robert said, looking conflicted, but his brother seemed suspicious. Robert has always been a bit clueless, probably treating Mom badly without even realizing. And it seems Sandra isn't the considerate type. "That's right. Kevin really understands me," she said. Hearing this conversation, Robert and I couldn't help but frown. Despite this, we decided to entertain our guests and led the couple to the living room. We all sat around the living room table, with Robert and me on one side and the couple on the other. "Now, why are you just sitting there? Serve the tea," my mother-in-law demanded. "Huh? I thought you were going to make the tea, mother-in-law. What's this about making an old woman work? See, Kevin, Sandra is like this," she said, even pretending to cry. I was so stunned by her behavior that I couldn't even respond. Once I served the tea, the mood became serious. The truth is, we sold our house. Robert and I were surprised and shocked by Kevin's words. But the one who was most shocked was my mother-in-law. "Why? Why would you do something like that? Didn't he come to pick me up?" she asked, flustered, confronting Kevin. He tried to calm her down, saying, "Take it easy," and then began to explain. "We'd been in debt, and even though we could pay it off by selling the house, we're broke and have nowhere to live, so we came here to see if we could stay. What debt? I tried to start a business, but it didn't work out. These things happen, you know, Kevin said with a laugh. Robert and I sighed in frustration. We only need to stay until we find a new house. Please, we have no one else to turn to, the couple pleaded, bowing their heads together. I think our expressions must have been mixed, but if they had nowhere else to go, we felt obliged to help. We agreed to let them stay temporarily in our house. However, we made it clear that they had to find their own place within a month. Okay, Kevin said, still laughing, and went to prepare for their move. After they left, my mother-in-law sat quietly, looking lost in thought. Robert and I assumed she was still processing everything. The next day, the couple's belongings arrived promptly. This much. Where are we going to put it all? This is going to be tricky. We might have to sell some things or rent a storage unit, my mother-in-law said as we discussed what to do with Kevin's belongings. Then, out of nowhere, she dropped a bombshell on us. I've been thinking, wouldn't we be more secure in the future if Kevin stays here, so you freeloaders can leave, can't you? My mother-in-law's sudden statement left my husband and me shocked. If you insist, I can tolerate Robert staying, but I don't need a wife who can't do anything. Get a divorce then, Sandra's space can be used for all these packages, my mother-in-law eagerly demanded, looking at my husband for approval. What are you talking about? He reacted, as he usually did, completely surprised. Then my brother-in-law and his wife arrived. My mother-in-law greeted them happily, but I was still shaken by her earlier words. My husband decided to ignore the situation for the moment and asked his brother to deal with the packages. There were more than I expected. Try to reduce the number, rent a storage unit, or sell some if necessary, my husband said. His brother glared at him and said, "What are you talking about? These packages are important. How could I sell them? And what if they get stolen from a locker? What if they get damaged? Are you going to take responsibility, bro?" My husband shook his head at his brother's selfish behavior. This is our house, you know. It's only fair that you endure some inconvenience, right? If you don't like it, find a place to live quickly and leave. But then my mother-in-law shouted, "What are you talking about? Didn't I just say if you two are not happy with Kevin and the rest, you can leave? You're basically freeloaders. You're not needed in this house. Kevin is trying to start a business and all you two do is loaf around the house, doing so-called remote work. You're a nuisance." It was like my mother-in-law was acting as if it were her own house. My husband and I exchanged looks in disbelief. My brother-in-law and his wife were surprised at my mother-in-law's words, but then they started to smirk. "That might not be a bad idea, Mom. It sounds good. It's a hassle to find a new place, so we could stay here. So why don't you sell this house to us, Carol?" My brother-in-law said, "I feel uneasy with you two around, so it would be better if you sold this place to us. And it seems like our mother-in-law agrees with us, so sell this place to us." My husband and I were stunned by their words. "What nonsense are you?" my husband started, but was cut off by my mother-in-law, who smirked. "See, both Kevin and Carol are saying the same thing. So what will you do, Robert? If you're going to divorce, you can stay here." My mother-in-law glared at me triumphantly. I prepared myself to respond, but my husband spoke up first. "Why you get to say whatever you want? Why should Sandra have to leave?" My husband was visibly angry, his voice raised. "Don't raise your voice like that. It's better without a burden around, right?" My mother-in-law retorted. But my husband responded with frustration, "You don't understand anything. This is Sandra's house." At my husband's words, my mother-in-law, brother-in-law, and his wife gasped. My husband continued, adding to the tension. "This is the house that Sandra bought for our life together." What are you saying?" "There's no rule saying only the husband can buy the house. Besides, Sandra covers all of Mom's allowance and living expenses. Sandra said she'd take on that responsibility because your pension is minimal, and it would be hard for you to have financial freedom with just that." Robert glared intensely at his mother. Despite this, my mother-in-law seemed incredulous, looking at me and snickering in disbelief. "Unbelievable. Sandra just sits on the computer all day. She doesn't even do housework properly. Wasn't my allowance coming out of my pension? Otherwise, there's no way Sandra could afford to give me $500 a month." Moreover, my mother-in-law continued, "Sandra is the one managing my pension, isn't she? You might have told Robert otherwise, but I'm sure you're dipping into my pension." She puffed up her chest and glared at me. I glared back, refusing to back down. It's true that I've succeeded as a business owner. You're lying. Stop spreading lies about my wife. You should divorce this lying wife already. You can live here with me, Kevin, and Carol. Besides, there's no proof that Sandra isn't earning money. Here it is. With that, I pulled out my paycheck and showed it to her. The sight of it left my mother-in-law, Kevin, and his wife stunned. Since Mom moved in, we haven't used any of her pension. If Mom ever wanted to leave, Sandra has been managing it so she could live independently. But instead, Mom, you've been bossing Sandra around, interfering with her work. You're the problem. If you don't like Sandra, you should leave right now. I don't believe any of this, my mother-in-law retorted, refusing to listen to anything we said. Afterward, Robert and I sighed in disbelief, cutting her off. Well, if that's how you feel, we'll pack our things and move to a new house. You guys will be stuck with a mortgage. But if that's okay with you, don't come crying to us for help. If you insist, mother-in-law will leave even with a pension. Maintaining your lifestyle will be challenging, but I guess that can't be helped, can it? At our words, my mother-in-law turned beet red and yelled at us to leave. Wait, you can't be serious. We don't have to do that, do we? Kevin and his wife tried to intervene, but my mother-in-law gave us a fierce look and said, "Don't you dare talk back, Kevin. You're going to be a CEO, aren't you? I don't mind you using my pension, so just start a company and show us how successful you can become. I'll show you what happens when you defy us." Her words were filled with intensity. Hearing this, we decided it was best to no longer be involved with her or Kevin's family and left the house. Of course, the mortgage on the house remained, but we changed the ownership to Kevin's name. Some time had passed since then. While there was still some lingering dissatisfaction from that incident, being freed from my mother-in-law's sarcasm, we were able to return to our normal routine. While we were working from home like usual in our new apartment, my mother-in-law called my husband, Kevin, crying. She said Kevin took her pension money and disappeared a week ago. She and Carol, Kevin's sister, were left alone in the house and needed help. My mother-in-law was too upset to talk, so she passed the phone to Carol. Carol explained that since Kevin's failed business and selling the family home, their parents had cut ties with them. They hadn't been able to reach their parents since then. My husband sighed and said, "I knew it. He told them not to involve us because we had warned them before leaving. He said they could report Kevin missing to the police, but that we wouldn't help them." After hanging up, I was shocked by my husband's reaction, but he believed they deserved what happened, and I ended up agreeing with him. They kept calling my husband's phone numerous times. Whenever he reluctantly answered, Carol would cry about not knowing how to report Kevin missing. We were surprised she didn't know what to do and advised her to call the police. However, despite their efforts, they couldn't locate Kevin. Just when we thought Kevin might remain missing, we heard the news that he had been arrested for robbing a bank in another state. Apparently, he did it to pay off his debts. This wasn't his first time committing such a crime, and it seemed he was likely facing a significant jail sentence. Carol is stuck living with my mother-in-law in their old house because she can't go back to her parents' home. She's unsure if she'll divorce Kevin, but that's not her priority right now. She's working with a temp agency, struggling with her first job, but somehow managing to get by each day. My mother-in-law is in a tough spot too. Kevin took all her pension, and now she's left to repay his debts. She started working part-time to make ends meet. While my husband and I feel bad for them, we decided not to help and cut off contact. They're experiencing the tough realities of life my mother-in-law often talked about. Despite the challenges since my mother-in-law moved in, my husband and I are relieved to have returned to our peaceful routine.